Welcome back to Behavioral Science for Brands, a podcast where we connect academics and marketing. Every other week, we sit down to look at the country's best brands and explain the behavioral science that powers them. I'm Michael Aaron Flicker.
And I'm Richard Shotton.
And today we're talking sustainability and what we can learn from the sustainability movement and how that can be applied to brands. Let's get into it. Okay, Richard, so we're choosing sustainability as a topic. One, it's got great importance to both you and I as citizens of the world, as marketers, as people who help brands think about how they're going to contribute to society, but also with a lot of focus on sustainability over the last 10 years, there's really a lot of interesting learning that we can have from it. So today we're going to do something a little different. Instead of picking a brand and talking about its sustainability pledges or what they're doing for sustainability, we're going to look at two relevant biases that could help promote sustainability and show some real world examples. That's what we're going to do today. And I thought I'd kick our podcast off with a clear and compelling definition of sustainability. So I went looking, and the UN had a report in 1987 called the Brundtland Report that I think has the clearest definition of what sustainability is. One sentence. It says they define sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability for future generations to meet their own needs. Pretty compelling, meaning sustainability is doing what we do now without taking from what the future will be needing to do then. Like, to me, that was pretty compelling. Is that a good example of sustainability, a good definition in your mind?
Absolutely fine. I think the definition suggests there's something very positive here. Most people want to achieve that goal. Where behavioural science is involved is how do you achieve that goal? How do you encourage behaviours that are sustainable? And that's, I think, where the value lies.
Yeah, and for us, we're looking at this through the lens of academic and practical marketing. In America, sustainability has been politicized. There's a left and a right view of what we need to do now to be a superpower of the world and what we need to do with the responsibility for making sure that industries are not just harvesting and not giving back. But let's put that on the side for the purpose of this episode and say, there's real biases that can be used from behavioral science to help inform how you market sustainability or how you can use it less directly to support the growth of your brand and your business.
Absolutely. So if encouraging sustainable behaviour is your goal, there are lots of experiments that can increase the probability that you achieve that. Now, maybe the most important one is social proof. So I've talked about this before. We talked about this on the Aperol episode. And social proof is the idea that if you position or make people feel like a behaviour is commonplace, that behaviour becomes more appealing, people are more likely to do it. And there are lots and lots of experiments that prove that, from people like Cialdini and Fang. Again and again, you see social proof operating effectively. However, the study I thought might be a good one to kick off today is a slightly less well-known study. Mm-hmm. And it talks about a nuance of social proof. And it's the idea that you can encourage behaviour, not just by explicitly stating that behaviour's popularity. It is enough just to imply the popularity of the behaviour. So the study in question comes from Kees Keizer, a Dutch psychologist, works at the University of Groningen. And for his experiment, he finds an alleyway in the Netherlands where loads of people park their bike. Mm-hmm. And crucially, there is no bin nearby.
No garbage bin.
No garbage bin. That's going to come in important later. He goes down to the bikes that are parked there early in the morning and puts a flyer, a leaflet on the handlebars of the bar, flyer for a fictitious sports shop. He then wanders off 20 or 30 yards and then stealthily monitors what do those cyclists do when they return to their bikes. Now, there's no bin there, so do they, like good citizens, take their garbage home with them, or do they chuck it on the floor? Sometimes he sets up the alleyway. He's gone down there really early in the morning and he's cleaned it up. He's covered over the graffiti. He's picked up every single piece of garbage. He's made it look like the social norm is to take your litter home with you. Now, when he does that, just 33% of people chuck their rubbish on the floor. Other days, same alleyway, goes down to the alleyway really, really early in the morning, and this time spray paints the walls with graffiti and chucks loads of litter on the floor. He's creating the impression that most people chuck their rubbish around. Now, when he does that, there is a more than doubling of littering rates. So we're up to 69% of people chucking their litter on the floor. What he's shown in this study is if you want to harness social proof, sometimes the best way to do it is not to directly communicate what the norm of behaviour is. Sometimes it's most effective to imply what the norm of behaviour is. And I think why implying is so much more powerful is if a brand or a business tells an audience that behaviour is popular, that audience might treat the message sceptically. Now, often people are trying to influence us for their own benefit. But if we think we've come to our own conclusion about how popular a behaviour, like chucking litter on the floor is, if we think we've come to our own conclusion, well, who do we trust more than ourselves?
No one.
Exactly. So this opens up how marketers should think about applying social proof. You don't just have to directly state something. Think about the design. Think about the body language of your products. That can be used to encourage behaviour.
Yeah, it's a question. As you were talking, I was thinking a lot about our friends in e-commerce, our friends in direct-to-consumer marketing, and when they use social proof, they talk about really having either 5-star reviews on the website, which implies social proof, or having influencers use their products, which implies social proof. But this is a much more nuanced point. It's not just the direct endorsement of a 5-star review or the direct endorsement of holding a can of soda and saying, drink it. It's making it feel like it's the norm. Yeah. That's really the power of this insight.
And you mentioned e-commerce. There is a lovely example of a lateral use of social proof on e-commerce sites. So the psychologist in question is Peterson at University of Texas. And what he does is with over 1,000 people, he alternates the language on e-commerce sites that's used to describe items that aren't there to buy. There's none available, so you can't buy them.
Right, they're out of stock, and you'll tell us what the words
are. I'm trying to avoid using some of these words because that's the test. There's no other words used. So it's exactly as you say. Sometimes he labels the items as either out of stock, other times unavailable, other times sold out.
Got it.
And what he shows is that the irritation level with the product and the website is 15% lower when the term sold out is used versus out of stock or unavailable. Now, his argument is this is all about social proof. If you say unavailable or out of stock, you as a website are drawing attention to your ineptitude. You have not managed to get the right stock in the right place at the right time. So therefore, the consumer's annoyed. If you say sold out, well, suddenly you're emphasising that this was a very popular item. There's huge demand for it. And that harnesses social proof. And exactly as you say, that is an example of e-commerce subtly implying popularity, whereas what e-commerce normally does is bestseller, 1 million sold, 9 out of 10 people do this. E-commerce tends to apply it very directly and explicitly, but even there are examples where popularity is implied.
I was at a conference recently where they were talking about how to best promote and support diversity in advertising, diversity of not just racial and gender diversity, but physical ability, those in wheelchairs, those with hearing impairment, sight impairment. And the argument from the leaders of the industry was make it normal and don't put the focus on them. Make it part of the fabric of the ad so that it's just part of what you see in everyday life. And that has proven to be more impactful and effective for showing diversity of all types, which to me feels like a connection to what you're saying.
Absolutely. And actually, diversity is a fascinating area because it is, I think, a topic where sometimes social proof can be misused. So it's not just that social proof can be used to encourage diversity. Actually, inadvertently, sometimes people misuse social proof and it can make the situation worse.
Yeah.
So there is an amazing set of studies from Robert Cialdini back in 2003, and he looks at what happens if you emphasise an unwanted behaviour is commonplace. So he runs this with the Petrified Wood National Park in Arizona, and he's picked this national park because loads of tourists are going there and stealing bits of petrified wood as souvenirs.
Yes.
So finds a path, middle of nowhere, really deserted, and he sprinkles bits of petrified wood along the path. So anyone who goes down that path has the opportunity to steal.
It's right there. You can take them if you want to.
And because you're in the middle of nowhere,
Nobody
you expect that you'll get away with it. But unbeknown to the tourist, there is a CCTV camera hidden 50 yards away. So he is monitoring theft rates. Now, when there is no sign up, 2.9% of people steal a bit of wood. So that is the control, that's the benchmark. When he puts up a sign that purposely misuses social proof and says 14 tonnes of wood are being stolen from the park each year and it's ruining the look of the park, he's emphasising lots of people steal. When he does that, there is a almost tripling, more than doubling of theft rates. We're now up to 7.9% of people stealing.
The opposite of the goal.
Exactly. Yeah. He's exactly what he says. He says, look, this is a crime promotion strategy, not a crime prevention strategy. You've gone from 2.9 to 7.9%. His argument is, if you stress an unwanted behaviour is commonplace, you remove a sense of transgression, and then that behaviour, the very thing that you're trying to stop, becomes more common still.
Right.
So bring this back to diversity or sustainability. What many well-meaning campaigns will go out and do is say, only 20% of board members are women, or millions of people waste their food every year. Very well-meaning campaigns that are trying to shock people out of their complacency by emphasising the scale of the problem. But from a psychological perspective, from the evidence base, it will make the situation worse because companies will think to themselves, oh, well, we hire 25% of women, we're doing fine. If all my competitors are only doing 20% on the board.
It emphasises the wrong thing.
It emphasises exactly the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Or, well, if every American is wasting 50% of their food and I'm only chucking out
1 out of 3.
Yeah, then I can, probably relax a bit and take my foot off the gas.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, I think there. Social proof can be used to encourage the behaviour you want. You can really use it powerfully if you imply popularity. But maybe the first thing every brand should do is be very careful not to use it in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing that behavioral science can help us with, because we can understand the studies that power this, and then we can have a more confident view of how to use social proof in the right way and not make a mistake and use it in a way that you didn't intend.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm very conscious, I've talked about studies like littering and theft rates, and we did say this podcast was going to be about sustainability, but these can definitely be applied in the area of sustainability. The argument for sustainability would be identify the environmentally friendly behaviour that you want to encourage.
Yes.
And then think to yourself, how do I make that behaviour very visible? So how can I make what is often a private decision, how can I make it more public? And there's a great book by Jonah Berger where he talks about this idea of make what's often a private decision, make it public, and you're harnessing social proof in the right way. Now, if that all sounds a bit woolly and vague, I'll give you a specific example of someone who's done that. In Britain, the number plates for cars are white at the front, yellow at the back. Back in the early 2000s, that meant that if someone was driving an electric car, maybe they overtake you in the electric car, you as a driver don't know that it's electric. That car looks the same as a petrol or diesel car.
Sure.
It's got the same number plate, the same look and feel. What the government did a few years ago was give distinctive number plates to electric cars So they have a different number plate from everyone else. It's got this green flash down the side of the number plate. So suddenly electric cars are very noticeable. And even if the number of them hasn't changed, because they're distinctive, because you spot them easily now, it feels like there's more and more of them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's what feels like a popular behaviour that taps into social proof, not what is actually popular.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a study that you and I spoke about from Linda Bacon in 2017 that takes this and applies it very commercially.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it's helpful to hear it because it's building on the idea of making it seem commonplace, but also making it stand out. So she tests restaurant menus, and she's specifically looking at how can we place vegetarian options on a menu. So in the base case, she segregates the menu. You have a meat menu, and then you have a vegetarian menu. And in the variable, she takes the vegetarian items and she puts them throughout the menu. They're more interspersed. And what she finds is that there's almost a doubling of people who choose a vegetarian item when it's interspersed throughout the menu. And so when you and I talked about this, we were asking, why is that the case? What's going on here? And she's making it feel less isolated when you don't have it as a small item in the bottom right hand. Here's what vegetarians choose. She's helping make it more mainstream and make it seem like more common of an option. Is that how you saw it?
I think that's exactly right. Now, if you have an item like mac and cheese interspersed in your menu, it feels like an item that lots of people pick, that it's for people like me, it's likely to be chosen. If it's put down at the special small segregated area of a menu right at the bottom, it feels like an aberrant choice that is not commonplace. And if it's not commonplace, from the perspective of social proof, there must be something wrong with it. So again, it leads you to some interesting decisions about design. Even something like a menu, you can apply social proof, not just by highlighting items as bestseller, which is how people often think social proof has to be used. Even in these more subtle design styles, they will bring with them baggage around whether it's making the item look popular or unpopular.
Yeah, it's very helpful here you say, because you could start to think about all the ways to apply this. We did an episode very early on, I think it was episode 3 on Aperol, and the big takeaway we had all that time ago was Aperol has been so successful because they make their product visible, known. They make their success seen. They use the red orange from Aperol in all the table tents, in the outside on the umbrellas, in the balloon glasses, and so you start to see Aperol everywhere, and it looks more popular, just like just like the electric car example that you had.
Yes, most spirits, the problem the brand has is once they've been mixed with Coke or lemonade,
they're brown, whatever, they're mixed out.
You've no idea who's drinking what. The amazing thing with Aperol is once you're away from the bar, it's completely distinctive. So it doesn't take that many people drinking Aperol in a bar for it to look phenomenally popular. Whereas for other brands, it could be half the bar are drinking it, but you just don't know. So the Jonah Berger talks about this idea of think about your product. When it's being consumed, is it visible? Is it public? If not, you should be putting an awful lot of effort to trying to change it. And if you do, you're harnessing one of the most powerful biases there is.
Very cool. So let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to look at a second bias that powers the sustainability movement that we think could be used by brand marketers.
Behavioral Science for Brands is brought to you by Function Growth, Ad Age's 2023 Newcomer Agency of the Year. Your D2C business isn't broken, you're just doing it wrong. By fusing advanced technology and behavioral science, Function Growth solves the biggest problems faced by today's DTC brands. Visit us at www.functiongrowth.co to learn more.
Welcome back to Behavioral Science for Brands. Today, Richard and I are talking all about sustainability and what we can learn from the sustainability movement, from brands that really want to advance sustainability causes, and the behavioral science that might help them. So we're back in the second half of this episode. Richard, what's the next bias you were thinking about sharing today?
So the second bias I want to talk about is an idea that we could call appeal over duty. And if you have a product that is sustainable or has an environmental benefit to the planet, you've got to ask yourself a question. Is talking about sustainability the best way to drive the sales of the product that you're trying to encourage? And I think sometimes there is a situation where the best way to encourage sustainable behaviour is not to talk about sustainability.
That's radical. No,
well,
but it
in
may
the
be.
world of sustainability, I would say for most categories, it would be a statement of the bleeding obvious.
Yeah.
Like if you want to sell a lager, Budweiser don't talk about the taste. If you want to sell about a trainer, you don't talk about the durability of the soles. Yeah, for some reason, when it comes to ethical areas, we feel like we have to talk about the ethics. When it's about healthy food, we feel we have to talk about the health.
But that may not be the thing that most appeals.
Often it's not.
Yeah.
So there's a lovely study from 2017 by Bradley Turnwald, who's at Stanford, and he works with a cafeteria over 7 weeks. It's a busy cafeteria. Across that time, there's approaching 30,000 diners. So we're not talking small numbers.
Yes.
And what he does is try and encourage people to pick vegetarian food. Now, that has a massive sustainable benefit. One of the biggest contributors of CO2 is eating meat. If you want to reduce your own personal footprint, switching to a vegetarian diet is a great thing to do. What Turnwald does is sometimes he will try and encourage people by emphasising the healthiness of the veg. So he labels the green beans as low and light green beans. On other days, he emphasises the taste, the indulgence of those products. He talks about sweet and sizzling green beans. When he looks over 7 weeks in terms of the volume of vegetables bought, there are 41% more vegetables sold when it's the indulgent aspect that's emphasised rather than the healthiness. What Turnwald argues is even if you're trying, your aim as a marketer is to boost the sales because they're healthy or because they are environmentally friendly, it doesn't mean that that's the thing that you should talk to with your consumers. Often consumers are much more interested in what's the benefit for them in the immediate term, what's going to taste nice, what will be enjoyable, what will make them look like a great citizen towards in front of other people. So I think you have this paradoxical situation in which the best way to encourage sustainable behaviour is not necessarily to talk about the behaviour that you're trying to encourage is sustainable.
Yeah, and to bring that to the commercial side, you can think about other examples of brands that have sustainable gains that have not used sustainability as the main focus. One example that you and I have talked about is Tesla. I think we even talked about it in a previous episode. In 2022, their highest performing ad was entitled All Out. We'll drop it into the show notes, but it was focused on the car's performance, the entertainment system, and nothing about the sustainability angle of Tesla.
Yeah. And that's a great ad, an effective ad, but also I'd say the brand as a whole demonstrates that it's a status symbol, a beautiful car, a performance-driven car first, and then the environment comes second. And Turnwald study would suggest more sustainable brands should think like that. I met someone recently, and I apologise, I've forgotten their name, but they were telling me about the Nike trainer where they had radically reduced the environmental impact. And when they first tried to tell consumers about that, when they emphasised that it was much less carbon and resource intensive, people thought that was great in theory, but when it came to handing over their cash, they weren't interested because they assumed, well, it's not going to be a great trainer and I'm not going to run very well in it. But when they talked about when they changed those ads and talked about the lightness being and that reduction of weight helping you become an even faster runner, then it flew off the shelves. Now, the impact on the environment doesn't matter what reason you sell the product. It doesn't get a double benefit because you talk about sustainability. It's another example of focus on the thing that will unlock people's wallets or their behaviour change, not what maybe morally they should be doing.
Yeah, and maybe even one step further, it's most important to be egoless in driving the success of a good product rather than making your marketing about why you care about the product. Either as a creator, as a brand leader, or as an investor, you may be involved in a brand for a certain reason. That's not necessarily why it's going to have market success.
I like that. I think that phrase egoless is a great one. Also, if we think back to right at the beginning, you mentioned that the topic of sustainability has become politicized, and I think that may well be true in America. It's also, I think, increasingly true in Britain. If you don't mention sustainability, you can target 100% of the population, not one wing of the population. There's an amazing study by Dina Gromit at Wharton where she shows people 2 light bulbs. And for one light bulb, she says, look, it's expensive to buy, but it'll be super cheap once you've bought it. The other light bulb is cheap to buy, but it's expensive to run. And then she asked people which they'd prefer. She has previously recorded these people's political views. And what she finds is the likelihood of picking what is essentially a low energy light bulb, which is good for the environment, people are just as likely to pick the bulb, whatever their political affiliation. But then what she does is gets another group of people, gives them the same 2 light bulbs, but this time the one that is cheap to run, she labels as low energy usage, low CO2. Once she brings the environment in,
the CO2 part,
exactly, people's political affiliation is activated. Suddenly, those on the strong Democratic end are much more likely to buy the low energy light bulb, but those on the strong Republican end are much less likely to buy the low energy light bulb. So you've got a bit of a debate here as a brand. Either you could think about not bringing the environment into it and targeting the entire population, or you could discreetly target a group whose identity suggests the environment's an important matter and then bring it into play. But if you don't use one of those 2 tactics, then I think you could have problems in store.
Either if you don't use one of those 2 or if you use it in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Well, this is all very interesting, Richard. Let's bring ourselves to a close now. Can you recap the biggest learnings from today?
We've discussed 3 big things. The first was around social proof. This idea that if you want to encourage behaviour, make sure that behaviour looks like it's commonplace.
Yep.
The study we discussed was the Kaiser study. And the interesting twist there is that you don't just have to explicitly state popularity. By creating an impression implying popularity, that's probably the most effective way of applying social proof. So that was our first set of studies. The second study we talked about was a watch out. When people try and encourage sustainable behaviour, too often they emphasise the scale of the unwanted behaviour. Loads of you lot aren't recycling. Loads of you are driving gas-guzzling cars. The danger with that is it applies social proof in the wrong way. It's negative social proof. If you emphasise the scale of an unwanted behaviour, you tend to get a backfire effect and you encourage the very behaviour you don't want. So look out for this in your communications. Make sure you are emphasising the scale of the behaviour you want to happen, not the scale of the behaviour you don't want to happen. And then the third slightly counterintuitive study we discussed was this idea of appeal over duty. Just because you want people to behave in an environmentally friendly way, it doesn't mean that the best way to activate that behaviour is to talk about the environmentally friendliness. You might want to talk about the indulgence, the enjoyment, the status that comes from your product. just because it's sustainable doesn't mean sustainably should be the content of your ads.
Makes good sense. As we come to a close, we always like to think about things a little bit more broadly. Sustainability, you and your family. Is there something that you all do at home that's your little contribution to sustainability? Is there something that you all do that you'd like to share?
The one thing that I try and do is if I'm traveling to Europe, at least Western Europe, try and get the train where I can.
Yeah.
And frankly, yes, I like the fact it's a lower CO2 footprint to get the train to Bonn or Brussels than flying, but also it's just a much, much nicer way to travel.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. You have a nice 5 or 6 hours to yourself that you can enjoy and relax, whereas planes are just salami sliced into so many tasks that there's no relaxation, there's no work done. So both good for the environment and I think much nicer for you as a traveller.
Very nice.
Yourself?
This was a Instagram-inspired purchase, but we have a device at home that does overnight composting. So all of our food scraps, eggs, banana peels, little pieces of bread the kids don't eat, all go into this device. I'm not being paid for this, called Lomi, Lomi. And you turn it on in the evening, and overnight it heats and turns the food, and in the morning it's dirt.
Oh wow!
It's an amazing little device, and with 3 little kids at home, all we have is food waste. I mean, there's lots of extra scraps and extra pieces. All that then just gets thrown in the backyard and becomes part of the dirt in the backyard. And a lot of reduction of food waste matter into the into the dumps and into the system. So that's a little thing we do.
Great stuff.
Richard, thanks for talking about sustainability today. I know it's an important topic to you and me personally, and important to help marketers who have products in the sustainability space be effective when marketing them. As we come to a close, we talked a little bit about the Aperol episode. For those that are interested in learning more about how to use social proof in lateral ways, it's a great episode. We should link it in the show notes, and folks that want to take a look at it can, but it was a very interesting episode early at the start of our podcast. And until then, we welcome people to write in, give us their thoughts, anything you'd like us to cover. And until next time, I'm Michael Aaron Flicker.
And I'm Richard Shotton.